first time my daughter asked me why I never visited her mother's grave. She was only 6 years old. At that age, she asked the question with innocent curiosity. "Dad, why don't we ever go see Mom?" I was washing dishes when she asked it. For a moment, my hands froze under the running water. I looked down at her small face and forced a smile. "Maybe another day, sweetheart." She accepted the answer then. Children often do. But as the years passed, she kept asking. On birthdays, on Mother's Day, on quiet nights when she missed someone she never truly got to know. And every single time I found a way to change the subject. What I never realized was that every excuse only made her more curious. Because the truth wasn't simple. The truth was something I had buried deeper than any grave. Something I had spent 12 years trying to forget. My name is Michael. I'm 58 years old. And for most of my daughter's life, I have been lying to her. Not about who her mother was. Not about how much her mother loved her. But about the last promise I made before everything fell apart. The day my daughter turned 12, everything changed. It was a Saturday morning. I walked into the kitchen and found her sitting quietly at the table. There was no television, no phone, no music, just silence. She was staring at an old photo album. The same album I had hidden years ago. My stomach dropped. Slowly, she looked up. "Dad." I knew immediately. The question was coming again. She opened the album to a picture of her mother. A beautiful woman with bright eyes and a smile that could light up an entire room. The woman I once thought I would grow old with. "Why have we never visited Mom's grave?" This time her voice was different. Not curious. Not childish. She wanted an answer. A real one. I sat down across from her. For several seconds I couldn't speak. Because I knew the moment had finally arrived. The moment I had feared for 12 years. Then she asked something that shattered me. "Did you stop loving her?" I felt my chest tighten. "No." The answer came instantly. "No, sweetheart. I never stopped loving her." "Then why don't you go?" The room became silent. I stared at the photo in her hands. And suddenly I wasn't sitting in my kitchen anymore. I was standing in a hospital room 12 years earlier. Machines were beeping. Doctors were rushing around. And my wife, Emily, was fighting for her life. The complications came suddenly after childbirth. One moment everything seemed fine. The next, everything was chaos. I remember holding her hand. I remember telling her everything would be okay. And I remember the look in her eyes when she realized it wouldn't. She asked everyone to leave the room. Just the two of us remained. Then she whispered something that changed my life forever. "Michael." I squeezed her hand. "I'm here." She smiled weakly. "If something happens to me, don't talk like that." But she continued. "Promise me you'll never let our daughter remember me as a gravestone." I didn't understand. Tears were running down my face. "What do you mean?" She looked toward the nursery window where our newborn daughter slept. "Let her remember me through stories." I stayed silent. "Through pictures." Her voice became weaker. "Through love." Then she squeezed my hand. "Not through a cold stone in a cemetery." Couldn't breathe. She was asking me to promise something impossible. But she kept looking at me, waiting. So I promised. I promised her. And a few hours later, she was gone. For months after the funeral, I couldn't function. I barely slept, barely ate, barely spoke. The grief was overwhelming. Every time I thought about visiting the grave, I remembered that promise. So instead, I honored her in another way. I filled our home with photographs. I told stories about her. I made sure our daughter knew how funny she was, how kind she was, how brave she was. I wanted her mother to feel alive, not buried. Years passed. The pain became quieter, but the promise remained. And because I never explained it, my daughter started creating her own explanations. Maybe Dad was angry. Maybe Dad forgot. Maybe Dad didn't care. She couldn't see the promise I carried every day. Back in the kitchen, I finally looked into her eyes. Then I told her everything. Every word. Every detail. The promise. The hospital room. The final conversation. The reason I stayed away. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down her face. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. "You did exactly what Mom asked." I broke down. Completely. Because those were the words I had needed to hear for 12 years. But then she surprised me. "Can we visit her now?" I stared at her. She smiled through her tears. "I know who she was because of your stories." She squeezed my hand. I don't see her as a gravestone. For the first time, I realized something. The promise had been fulfilled. Our daughter knew her mother, not because of a cemetery, but because of love. The next morning, we drove there together. For the first time in 12 years. The cemetery looked exactly as I remembered. Quiet, peaceful, painful. We walked slowly toward the grave. My heart pounded with every step. When we finally stopped in front of it, neither of us spoke. The wind moved softly through the trees. Birds sang in the distance. And for the first time in over a decade, I looked directly at her name. Emily. My daughter placed flowers on the grave. Then she smiled. "Hi, Mom." 3 simple words, but they shattered every wall I had built around my heart. I stood there crying while the morning sun rose over the cemetery. Not because I was grieving, but because I finally understood something. Love doesn't live in photographs. It doesn't live in gravestones. And it doesn't disappear when someone leaves. Love survives in memories, in stories, in the people we leave behind. As we walked back to the car, my daughter slipped her hand into mine. And for the first time in 12 years, the weight I had carried finally felt lighter. Because the truth was no longer buried. And neither was my heart.